The corridors of the Hurries star station, orbiting the heart of the galaxy, vibrated with an almost palpable tension. There were rare days when all the representatives of the greatest cosmic powers gathered, and this was one of those days, not to resolve common disputes, but to discuss the future of a race that just over 3 centuries ago still looked at the sky with fascination and ignorance: humans. The Earth ambassador stood at the head of the oval table, a solitary and imposing figure at the center of the intergalactic stage. His eyes seemed to slowly scan each of the beings around him, and the silence was so dense that you could barely hear the breathing of those present. There were looks that avoided his, others that looked at him with a mixture of contempt and caution. For many there, the simple fact of sharing the same space with a human was already an affront. Finally, one of those present stood up, a being with iridescent skin and slender tentacles whose eyes were fixed on the ambassador with veiled curiosity. "Ambassador," he began, his voice reverberating off the station walls, "today is a historic day. It is with great honor that we welcome the Earth Empire into our alliance of civilizations." The ambassador remained silent, his brown eyes fixed on the document that was on the table, as if he was not really listening to the alien's words. There was a moment of visible discomfort in the leader of the meeting, who, feeling the weight of the atmosphere, raised a golden scroll, displaying it with a certain solemnity. "After months of intense negotiations, we reached the final agreement. Now, all that remains is the ratification of this treaty by each of the members present here." With a subtle bow, he was the first to sign the parchment, sealing the document with the symbol of his own empire. From then on, the treaty was passed from hand to hand, each representative adding their seal or signature. Some with an expression of indifference, others with looks full of disapproval. However, when the document reached the hand of a reptilian creature, a spark of fury broke the silence. With a quick movement, the creature threw the document to the ground, its iridescent scales reflecting the cold light of the station. "How can we allow these barbarians to join us?" The creature's tone cut the air like a blade. "Calm down, Vinak," the meeting leader intervened, trying to maintain control. "It has already been decided. The Earth Empire will be one of us." "You decided," Vinak countered, his voice dripping with venom as he cast accusing glances at the other representatives. "But you did not suffer at the hands of these savages as we did. 24 incubation planets destroyed, turned to ash by your mechanical monstrosities." The Earth ambassador, until then quiet and impassive, finally spoke, his voice sounding firm but calm. "You attacked Earth." Vinak responded with a guttural sound of contempt. "A few 100,000 humans at most. Nothing that compares to the massacre you inflicted on my people. You exterminated entire generations. Entire families were erased before they were even born. No civilization ever committed such barbarities before. You left that insignificant rock you call home." Vinak's clawed finger pointed directly at the ambassador. "You are monsters dressed as diplomats, pretending to follow these rules of war, but breaking them the moment they become inconvenient. Under your own laws, you should be tried for war crimes." The ambassador's eyes narrowed. He took a step forward, his presence dominating the space, and his voice, low and more threatening, resounded in the room. "You attacked Earth." Each word seemed to weigh a ton, and the atmosphere became more tense. The ambassador continued to slowly advance toward the reptilian until he was a few centimeters away from his scaly face, which was beginning to lose its security. "We were a divided, fragmented race, fighting each other for pieces of land, for riches, for power until you showed up. Until you attacked Earth." The last sentence was said with an icy calm that plunged the room into an oppressive silence. "You gave us something in common, something that brought us together like never before. From that day on, we were no longer countries. We were no longer tribes nor corporations. We were the Earth, and you were the enemy." The ambassador bent down, picking up the golden parchment from the floor and placing it back on the table with a crash that made the other diplomats instinctively recoil. "Do you know why we created these rules of war?" he asked. "Because our species is marked by bloodshed. Each of these rules was created to prevent us from repeating the horrors we inflicted on ourselves. We have committed genocide, enslaved each other, tortured, and destroyed each other for millennia. These rules were our salvation, or we would have annihilated ourselves before we left our home." The reptilian, who until then maintained a haughty posture, now wavered. His claws trembled slightly, and his gaze no longer challenged the ambassadors. "But these rules were never designed to deal with an alien force attacking our home. the reptilian muttered, his voice laced with doubt. There was no provision for a war with beings that saw us as inferior. Rising again, the ambassador looked straight into the reptilian's eyes, the threat implicit but clear. And now you have an Earth united against you, with no rules limiting us. The only thing stopping our revenge is this treaty. He pushed the parchment toward Venak. I suggest you sign, or they will discover why we humans needed these rules so much. Trembling, the reptilian took the parchment, and with shaking hands, added his mark to the document. The ambassador watched in silence, and when the signature was made, he took the treaty and tucked it under his arm. It looks like my work here is done. Have a nice day, gentlemen. Without another word, he turned and left the room. When the door closed behind him, the other diplomats finally released a breath they didn't even realize they were holding. What a terrible species, muttered one of those present at the back of the meeting room. Away from the public eye, the discussions became increasingly intense. The reptilian Venak could not contain the contempt in his voice. We should never have agreed to let them in. The union of our forces would crush the Terran Empire without difficulty, he muttered, his eyes fixed on the void. The Alliance president, maintaining his composure, nodded slowly but with a grim expression. Maybe so, but at what cost, he replied. They have already reduced dozens of planets to ashes in response to less than 100,000 dead humans. Imagine what they would do if they were cornered. No, it's safer to tie these barbarians to us, try to civilize them, or at least keep them under control. Venak let out a hate-filled growl, his forked tongue flicking with irritation. There is no way to tame these creatures. They are a pest. Mark my words, these humans will spread like poison across the galaxy, growing until they become too strong for us to eliminate. We need to act now before they turn against us. The president, impatient with Venak's repetition of his speech, narrowed his eyes. So why did you sign the treaty if you were so opposed to their entry? He retorted, challenging the reptilian. Venak avoided his gaze for a moment before responding with a bitter tone. It will take decades, perhaps centuries, to recover from the loss of our hatchery planets. We are not in a position to fight such a brutal species. None of us are. Sighed, the president crossed his arms. Open conflict with humans would irrevocably weaken the alliance. I suggest everyone here gets used to the Terran Empire. I don't believe they will remain isolated for long. As the discussions dragged on, Ambassador John Edward walked quickly through the halls of the Grand Council building. His mind was in overdrive. He knew that sentiment among the delegates was at best divided, and at worst, openly hostile. Humans had not entered the galactic scene through diplomacy, but with fire and fury. Now they needed to find a way to coexist with the rest of the galaxy. Upon entering a discreet room, he was greeted by his assistant, Lieutenant Maria Sanchez, who was waiting with obvious concern. How was it? She asked, her eyes betraying fear. As expected, John replied, handing her the signed treaty. Most signed grudgingly, and some, like Venak, showed open hostility. But in the end, everyone signed. Maria quickly examined the document, scanning the signatures. Do you think they will honor the agreement? She asked. John sighed, tired but convinced. They go because they have no choice. They have seen what we are capable of, and they fear us. But fear does not sustain peace. We need to prove that we can be more than warriors. Maria reflected for a moment, agreeing. What will be the next step? Establish embassies on strategic worlds, initiate cultural exchanges, and launch joint scientific projects, replied John. We need to show that we are here to contribute to the alliance, and not just take advantage of it. In the following months, the Terran Empire began to integrate into the alliance of civilizations. Human embassies were established on several planets, and each was staffed with diplomats, scientists, and cultural representatives. Joint science and technology projects were launched, and cultural exchange programs were created to promote understanding between humans and the alliance of numerous species. Despite initial resistance, human efforts began to bear fruit. On the planet Zixer, a joint human-Zorian research station was built to study the unique geothermal properties of the planet's molten core. This project led to revolutionary discoveries in energy production, benefiting both species. On Merid, a lush planet known for its diverse flora, human agricultural experts joined forces with Meridian Banis to develop new crops capable of thriving in extreme environments. This collaboration significantly increased food production, helping to alleviate hunger on several Alliance member worlds. Cultural exchanges also played an essential role in overcoming distress between humans and other species. Human musicians, artists, and writers shared their works with the galaxy, while alien creators showcased their unique talents on Earth. These exchanges, little by little, began to break down the barriers of prejudice and promote mutual respect. However, not all interactions were peaceful. On the industrial planet Drar, a dispute between human workers and Jarian miners nearly escalated into violent conflict. Jarian, a species known for their fierce territorialism, distrusted human intentions and resented their presence. It took weeks of delicate negotiations, led by Ambassador Edward himself, to reach a compromise that satisfied both parties. Meanwhile, on Earth, the effects of joining the alliance were visible in all aspects of life. Cities became bustling centers of intergalactic commerce and culture. Alien visitors marveled at human ingenuity and resilience, while humans themselves discovered with fascination the immense diversity of life that was now part of their everyday lives. In the city of New Geneva, the planet's capital, the Terran Council met to discuss the future of humanity within the alliance. President Eleanor Weiss, a veteran diplomat, presided firmly. "We have made significant progress in our integration with the alliance," she declared, "but we need to remain vigilant and proactive." In the Terran Council meeting room, the atmosphere was serious. The implications of a new stage for humanity weighed on each of those present. President Eleanor Weiss listened attentively to Ambassador John Edward, who spoke with care and characteristic conviction. "Our presence is still viewed with suspicion by many," Weiss began. "We need to demonstrate our commitment to peace and cooperation." Edward, who had always known how to choose the right moment to intervene, leaned forward slightly. His voice was firm but calm. "Madam President, I believe we must focus our efforts on expanding our humanitarian initiatives. There are many worlds in the Alliance that suffer from poverty, disease, and environmental degradation. We have the resources and knowledge to help." Weiss pondered for a few moments before responding, nodding slowly. "I agree. We will allocate more funds to these initiatives and ensure our actions are highly visible. We need to show the galaxy that humanity can be a force for good." While policies were being drawn up in the heart of Earth, a new danger was emerging in a distant part of the galaxy. On the planet Xander, home of the Xander, a warlike race with a long history of conquest, the rise of the Terran Empire was viewed with increasing concern. For Supreme Warlord Krak, the acceptance of humans into the Alliance was a direct threat to his expansionist plans. "We cannot allow these humans to gain ground in our sector," Krak roared, staring at his council with flaming eyes. "They are an unpredictable and dangerous species. We need to prepare for war." As tensions grew, John Edward received information about the Xander threat. He knew that a conflict with them could destabilize the fragile peace between the Alliance civilizations. He immediately called a meeting with President Weiss to discuss the scenario. "We can't afford another war," Edward said urgently. "The Xander are formidable, and a conflict with them would be devastating for both sides." Weiss, aware of the dangers, nodded in agreement. "We need to find a diplomatic solution. Let's send a delegation to Xander to negotiate. John, you must lead this mission. You have proven to be a skilled diplomat, and your presence may prevent them from taking aggressive action." With the mission defined, Edward began preparations, accompanied by a small group of diplomats and security officials. He set out for Xander, hoping to avert imminent disaster. Upon arrival, the environment was hostile. Xander's soldiers watched the human delegation with suspicious eyes, and the tension in the air was palpable. In the main hall, adorned with symbols of war and conquest, Krak was waiting for them, his gaze cold and calculating, while his generals remained silent around him. As Edward and his team approached, the Xander leader smiled. "Welcome to Xander," Krak said, sarcasm evident in his voice. "What brings you to our world, humans?" Edward, maintaining his calm and diplomatic composure, responded firmly. "We come in the name of peace, Warlord Krak. We know that your people view us with suspicion, but our intentions are not of conquest. We wish to work together to ensure prosperity for all." Krak listened attentively, but remained skeptical. "Words are easy, Ambassador, but actions speak louder." Over the course of several days, Edward and his team engaged in intense negotiations, seeking common ground with the Xander. Despite the hostility, Edward's patience and eloquence began to yield results. He shared stories of humanity's own struggles, highlighting the value of unity in overcoming adversity. In the end, Edward managed to strike a deal with Krak, ensuring a non-aggression pact and laying the groundwork for future cooperation. As he departed Xander, Edward couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, but also a lingering unease. Peace had been secured for now, but the galaxy remained a volatile place. Returning to Earth, Edward was greeted as a hero, his success celebrated as another step toward humanity's integration into the Alliance. But he knew that the challenges ahead would only grow. Humanity's place among the stars was still uncertain, and the journey to coexistence had only just begun.